Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Kaled Alamarie, and I have been working on the water sector in the city of New York for over 20 years. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to the Association of Yemeni Academics and Professional 8th webinar, The Future of Water Resources in Yemen. As we enter the new year, we want you to know that we sincerely appreciate your support in furthering the Association of Yemeni Academics and Professional mission to bring together Yemeni academics and professional around the world. Little stat, according to the world media data, water resources per capita in Yemen is 74 cubic meters per person per year. Now, if you compare that to the United States, water resources capital in the United States is 9,459 cubic meter per person per year. What that means is that in Yemen, they use less than 1%, which is 0.78%. And this is a dramatic differences. In the US, per capita water use has been declining since the 1980s, largely due to efficiencies improvement from product standards, codes, and third-party certification programs. Federal and state regulation almost always impact water use. As increased pressure on water supplies drive the need for more efficient and effective process, many experts recognize the need to not only integrate their drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, and reuse operation, but also to coordinate with other sectors, including energy, agriculture, industry, and municipalities. Although the holistic approach has the potential to offer many multi-benefit solution, implementation can be challenged because in integrated planning involves so many stakeholders and moving parts. The prospect of this approach can be overwhelming. The challenge is also increased because these integrated goals often contain big picture, long-term objective, which run counter to traditional regulation, timeline, and funding strategies. In Yemen, about 7 in 10 carry a computer with them in the form of smartphone, but the overwhelming majority in Yemen still lack one of the most basic modern convenience running water. According to UNICEF, 18 million people are in urgent need of water, sanitation, and hygiene assistance. Only a tiny proportion of Yemeni families are connected to the municipal supplies. We know that more than 90% of water is used for agriculture. Even in the capital, Sanaa, only 40% of the houses are connected. And they are lucky if water comes out of the tap more than 2 a week, and not even talking about the quality. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by 2 speakers that will cover the future of water resources in Yemen. So far, we're still waiting for Dr. Fadhl Al-Nozaily, but Dr. Mohamed Al-Hamdi is here. He will cover the scarcity to sustainability challenge facing water management in Yemen. Dr. Mohamed is a senior land and water officer and on the delivery manager of the Regional Water Scarcity Initiative at the Food and Agriculture Organization Regional Office for the Near East and North Africa. He contributed to the FAO effort supporting countries of the region in the area of sustainability with focus on intersector policy, coherence, water productivity, water accounting, and non-conventional water, among others. Prior to joining FAO, Dr. Al-Hamdi worked for 9 years in the United Nations Economic and Social Commission of Western Asia. For more than 9 years prior to that, he worked for ASCO. He served as the Deputy Minister for Water Affairs in the Ministry of Water and Environmental as the Vice Executive Chairman of National Water and Sustainable Authorities. Al-Hamdi holds a PhD in Water Resources Management from Delft University of Technology. Dr. Mohamed Al-Hamdi, تفضل.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. دكتور خالد، شكرا جزيلا وشكرا للمنظمة على تنظيم هذه الفعالية ودعوتي لأن أكون أحد المتحدثين فيها. من أجل تسهيل عملية النقاش أنا جهزت presentation few slides علشان تساعد في النقاش فيما بعد. ولأنه عرفت بأن سيكون هناك غير يعني مشاركين وحاضرين من غير المتحدثين باللغة العربية، فاسمحوا لي أن أعمل المداخلة باللغة الإنجليزية. Good morning, good evening, everyone. I know we're all coming from different parts of the world, so let me welcome all of you. I have prepared a small presentation to guide the discussion, and let me now share my screen, and please verify once you can see it. So can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. So as Dr. Kaled indicated, the title of the presentation is From Scarcity to Sustainability, Challenges Facing Water Management in Yemen. I will briefly be discussing at first trying to introduce water within the Sustainability Development Agenda, and that is the global agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals, just to show how water is embedded within.
Can you have a full screen, please? Full screen mode. Thank you. Yep.
Just to show how water is embedded within the Sustainable Development Agenda, and then I will move into discussing water challenges in Yemen, those challenges be it natural, institutional, and those connected to food security. Towards the end, I will touch upon technology prospects in helping water management in Yemen before I conclude with some conclusions and reflections. So as you know, the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in the year 2015. So that is 5 years ago. And this agenda is different from the previous one, which was the Millennium Development Goals, in that it was inclusive and countries were party in the negotiation of the agenda itself and the goals associated with the agenda. It is an agenda that is integrated, and it looks at the social, economic, and environmental pillars of development. The agenda has attached to it 17 goals, so-called the SDGs, and those goals are subdivided into 169 targets, and there are 231 indicators used to monitor these targets. And of course, it's a diverse agenda. It includes, it goes from no poverty, zero hunger, better education, better health, gender inequality, etc. So, and climate change, life underwater, life on land, sustainable energy, and finally, in goal 17 is cooperation and partnership. As you can see, goal 6 of the SDGs is on water, and it has 6 targets. There has been a lot of research on how the water goal is embedded, is a cross-cutting, and it is affected also by all the other goals. You can see here in the right hand of the slide, this is one of the research that was done, not by FAO, but you can see that each of the targets of the water goal is connected to so many other goals, meaning that in order to achieve the water goal, you really need to do the same with the other goals, and in order to achieve the other goals, you really need to look at water as a cross-cutting issue. So water is really at the heart of the global agenda for sustainable development. Just to illustrate this, this is just an example of how the target on water quality affects the other or targets of other SDGs. And you can see here 6.3 at the center. That is the target on water quality, to enhance water quality. And you can see how it either affects or is affected by the other targets of the other SDGs. So water is really, as I said, at the heart of the global agenda for sustainable development. Well, moving to the situation in Yemen, as Dr. Khaled indicated, if we look at the long-term average annual precipitation, we see that annually there is around 90 billion cubic meters of water falls as rainfall, based on an average of 167 millimeters per year. Now, that is a long-term average, and long-term average is not really meaningful. 90 billion cubic meters is a lot of water. It exceeds the share of Egypt in the Nile. But let's not forget that the rainfall in Yemen falls during the summer. A lot of that rainfall evaporates immediately or is not transformed into beneficial use. The water budget, the overall water budget is seen in the bottom chart, in the bottom table. And these figures are based on a report that was, or a study that was done in the 1980s. And that is one of the problems that we're facing in Yemen. We're really basing our judgments and our planning on outdated data, and also on studies that were done on the basis of estimates. What the table shows is that there is groundwater mining of non-renewable reserves, and also that evaporation, evapotranspiration is very high in the country, so a lot of water is evaporated immediately. And of course, you can see here that the rainfall estimate is at 37 billion cubic meters, not 90 as the FAO stat, the Aquastat, the FAO database indicates. And this discrepancies in the data is really a problem. We really need to look at this. We really need to strengthen the scientific and research base at the country so that we do better studies and research and understand better. Now, moving to the challenges in Yemen, as Dr. Khaled indicated in the beginning as an introduction, the per capita share of renewable water, and here we'll say renewable water resources, stands at 74 cubic meters per person per year. And you can see it's in the red, the column in the red, and you see it's towards the end. These are the Arab countries, and it's really towards the end. I mean, we're close to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, all these rich countries that have very high adaptive capacity. They are able to desalinate water, they're able to produce water non-conventionally. Yemen is not able to do that, and that is why it is really critical. 74 cubic meters per person per year is very low figure. We probably, and if you can compare that to the poverty line of 1,000, at orange line of 1,000 cubic meters, we see that we are way below the water poverty line. The idea here is there has been an estimate that the total storage, including fossil reserves of groundwater, is at 35 billion cubic meters. These are estimates, of which only the recharge is 1.3 billion cubic meters, which is being mined annually. A lot of the water that falls and runs in the Wadi system does not really reach anymore the sea, except in circumstances where heavy flooding takes place, but very little flow reaches the sea. And there is, because of the use of the water along the way, and also groundwater levels, drawdowns are very high. So water levels, groundwater levels is really dropping very fast. We all know in Sanaa, for example, it's dropping at the rate of between 3 to 6 meters annually. And of course, Yemen was in the past a place where there were a lot of springs. Now we don't see these springs anymore because of the heavy pumping of groundwater. So that's a natural challenge. There is little water, despite the fact that there is a lot of rainfall that we have. The level of water stress, this is the indicator of the target 6.4.2. This is the indicator that measures the level of water stress. And it is a ratio of the withdrawal, so how much we abstract to how much we have available as renewable freshwater resources. And you can see here, Yemen is at 170%. What does it mean? It means that we're really using non-renewable resources. So we're using fossil reserves of groundwater to supplement our use. And you can also see that we're near to the richer countries with a high adaptive capacity. They have the money to desalinate, they have the money to bring in water that is non-conventional water, be it wastewater use, because they have tertiary treatment, they have invested in a lot of treatment, and also desalination. The world average of this indicator is 17%. So you can see we are at 170% versus a world average of 17%. There is also water quality concerns. Wastewater treatment in Yemen is very primitive. Investment there is very low, and it has resulted in many cases, and also industrial wastewater as well, resulted in contamination of some of the groundwater in the areas of the country. Not mentioning also the agricultural use and pesticides, fertilizers, etc. More than 90% of all the water withdrawals goes to agriculture. And there has been a shift in the cropping patterns because of the cost of groundwater. So a lot of farmers do not irrigate cereals, and there is a shift towards cash crops like cat, vegetables, and fruit. Also, one of the natural challenges is the climate change. And if we look at the Notre Dame Gain Index, which measures climate vulnerability, we see that Yemen ranks, this is in 2018, Yemen ranks 168 out of 181 countries. It is, and this index is comprised of two, one looking at vulnerability, two indices, one looking at vulnerability and one looking at readiness, and the combination of this gives the index. So Yemen is the 26th most vulnerable country, and it is the 17th least ready country. So in plain language, it is extremely vulnerable, and it is very unready to address climate change effects or impacts. There is predictions when it comes to water, how climate change is going to impact water. There is a prediction that there will be a slight increase in precipitation, but yet there is also an increase in temperature. So whatever water, additional water is there, it will be offset by the evaporation. But what also has been predicted is an increasing trend of heavy precipitation. So a lot of flooding is coming. We can see the trend of flooding. There will also be a higher intensity and frequency of heat waves, and this will affect agriculture as well. Rising sea levels will also affect water quality of coastal aquifers with seawater intrusion. Now, moving into institutions. So I've just given a taste of the natural challenges. Now we're moving into the institutional challenges. Despite really having a good legal framework, and here I'm referring to the water law and also the water sector strategy, the national water sector strategy. These are very good documents, but despite these documents and the efforts that were done to develop them, we don't really see an impact on the ground. And in many cases, it's because of a lot of problems outside the water sector. So it's not really the Ministry of Water that is responsible, but is it really a comprehensive, integrated system, governance system? that needs to be in place. So we can see that there are problems when it comes to regulation versus service provision. The ministry itself, the organizational structure of the Ministry of Water, it is responsible for delivery of water to the households. So it is responsible for the local water utilities, local corporations, and at the same time, it is a regulator. It actually wants to regulate and allocate water to the different sectors. So there is a conflict of interest there, and I think that's not the right institution. The position of the irrigation sector remains outside the scope of the Ministry of Water. So how can the Ministry of Water and the National Water Resources Authority manage water while irrigation, which is a sector in the Ministry of Agriculture responsible for building water structures, the issue of centralized versus decentralized water management. The water strategy indicates that the model to follow is a decentralized water management, but on reality, we see a lot of hold on to a centralized power when it comes to water management. So that needs to be clarified and needs to be implemented on the ground. There is divergent visions between the sectors. While water looks at sustainable water management, sustainability of the resources, we see agriculture looking at horizontal expansion of agriculture regardless of water availability. There is the issue of weak enforcement. There is weak coordination. There is also changing local power structures. We all can see the spate irrigation systems and how elite and influential people, rich people, are acquiring lands in the upper sides of the wadis and diverting water from the flow in the wadis to irrigate their land on the expense of poor farmers downstream. So it's creating a social problem there, and we have witnessed that. There is limited financial resources when it comes to investment in infrastructure, irrigation, and so forth, operation maintenance of them. There is conflicting incentive systems. When we look at the taxes, the subsidies, for example, the drilling fees. The drilling fees are looked as an income for the National Water Resources Authority at the local level, and they are keen to obtain a lot of these fees while so it's a promotion of further drillings. So those conflicting incentives are still, they remain to be there and they need to be filtered out. And a very important element of the weak capacity. A lot of, be it human resources capacity, very weak, and also institutional as well. And of course, all of this, what I've just been explaining, is driven by corruption, vested interest, ignorance, etc. So moving from that to how water relates to its security. If we look at this figure, this graph, we can see that from the 60s to 2018, we see the production, the import, and the imported value. The line is the imported value in US dollars. And the two columns are production and import of wheat. We can already see that from the 60s, we've been importing wheat, and the import of wheat is been increasing every year. In 2018, Yemen imported 3 million tons of wheat, and it only produced locally around 106,000 tons. So you can see the food, if we take that as a signal of food security, we really can see that Yemen is not really depending on agriculture for food security. It is really depending on trade. So a lot of the food that comes in is coming from outside the country, except for the fruits, vegetables, and that are being produced locally. So if we look, so it is a trade dependence when it comes to food security. This 3 million tons of wheat would require more than 5.5 billion cubic meters if we want to grow that wheat in Yemen. So we've really imported that water virtually from outside. As I said in an earlier slide, there has been a shift from cereal production into cash crops. And this means there is higher water productivity in agriculture. So the per drop value, economic value, has been increasing because of the shift to fruits, vegetables, and GAT. GAT is particularly an important crop. There is high economic water productivity in producing GAT, but it has promoted expansion, a lot of expansion beyond the sustainable limits of the aquifers. So it has led to groundwater mining. Now I'm not judging GAT as a good or a bad. I'm just saying that while people tend to promote it, to say that now we need to grow wheat and cereals, maybe from the water perspective, it's better to grow fruits, vegetables, and GAT because there is a higher return in value when it comes to water productivity. At the same time, rural Yemen getting more benefits, more financial benefits, are able to access food financially, so they're able to buy food, and that food is in many cases imported from outside. But as I said, we really need to look at the incentive and disincentive systems when it comes to the taxes, subsidies, etc. While there is used to be, or still is, I don't know, very high taxes on GAT, we can see that at the same time then there was a lot of subsidies on diesel. So these do not come together. You're really giving a lot of subsidies to grow GAT, and you want to get a lot of taxes from them. So that is the system of incentive and disincentive system needs to be looked at carefully. And there is also a need to cap water consumption. So it's good to have higher water productivity, but you really need to set the limit where you say that's the ceiling, no more water beyond that limit because it becomes unsustainable. Moving to, there is also an issue when it comes to agriculture in the country. We see from this graph that there is poor crop yields almost throughout in all the crops that are grown in Yemen. Yields are below the technical potential and below the actual obtained yields under similar environments. There is very low water use efficiency. They use basin irrigation techniques. In the past, they used to do night irrigation, better irrigation scheduling, and now they don't do this. And you see because of the access to groundwater, the easy access to groundwater, and the high benefits and profits from GAT and cash crops are really making water or expediting the use of water. There is also inequalities. It is the rich farmers that can tap deeper aquifers, and this is leaving the poor farmers behind. When it comes to technology, I'm coming towards the end of my presentation. This is on technology, and sometimes when we discuss technology issues, we try to forget our traditional systems, and we forget that in the past we really managed water more sustainably. I just want to show some photos here to show the role of traditional systems and then the impact of recent technology. So you see, terracing has really been an effective, let's say, method in water management. It collects water. It is the real dams of Yemen, despite the fact that it's growing now GAT in almost everywhere. So Hafir and these water harvesting structures in areas where you would not find water because of the temperature, etc. These water harvesting structures have been traditional systems, very effective systems. These are Sahari Adan, an example. These also, you find these in every village, almost every village in the northern part of the country. And this just shows you how water was managed through, and these are sigayat, and be it at the household level or at the community level, these are very important. very important facilities and management approaches. This is spate irrigation, and you can see spate irrigation has been practiced for many, many years, hundreds of years, and it's effective water management, and it's also an equitable system in the past, now not anymore. These are systems in Hadramaut where the water allocation is precisely calculated so that each plot has a certain amount of water before it moves to the next, etc. And of course, we all know these city gardens, Magasham, in many of our cities, which is one of the use of gray water from mosques and from houses as well. So let's see the impacts of recent technology. The drilling rig, this has really been devastating when it comes to groundwater in Yemen. It's been, and now it's estimated that there is more than 100,000 wells, 15,000 alone in the Sanaa basin. So this is really irhab al-miyah. This is terrorism when it comes to water. And also there has been a lot of movement into building a lot of dams. And Yemen is becoming like this. Some of them, and this is in Bani Matar for those who know. Although it looks very nice and recreational wise, but what happens is that this is depriving downstream uses because of cutting them off from the water, and also it is promoting a lot of evaporation in the highlands. In addition to this, it is promoting gas production and, as I said, depriving the real farmers in the downstream at the plains, at the Hama, etc. From the water they need to grow cereals, vegetables, etc. So dams have not been really an issue, and it needs to be carefully assessed. And we all know, for example, lining the canals and channels. We see that this is a picture of the before and after of Asayla. We all know Asayla. It's becoming very nice to look at, but we tend to forget that there were a lot of wells alongside the Asayla, which now after the construction are not being recharged and they have dried out. So we could have built the same thing, taking into considerations the recharge of these wells to supply the mosques and the city of the old. Well, moving from the traditional systems that we have into the potential technology, desalination is the ultimate technology, yet it is still costly. It is costly to produce water from desalination, and also costly to pump water from the coast to the highlands where people need it. And of course, agriculture remains outside that scope because it's really not feasible economically and financially for agriculture. Wastewater treatment and reuse, this is a potential. We really need to focus on this. And this is an issue that actually serves two purposes. It's environmental protection, and it also provides additional water through reuse. Reuse of treated water, of course. Solar pumping, this is also an issue that is catching on now as a popular technology, but without boundaries and without limitations. We can see that we run the risk of higher unsustainable groundwater use, especially that maintenance. A lot of this equipment, if distributed for free, it really will promote higher unsustainable use of groundwater. Modern irrigation systems, sprinklers, drip, subsurface drip, these are effective, but they really need supportive policies. You cannot promote those while you still have diesel subsidies, for example, promoting easy access to water. So you really need to have coherent policies when it comes to promoting modern irrigation. Cropping patterns and drought tolerant seeds, we need more research on this. Irrigation scheduling systems, moisture, soil moisture sensors. One important element is land leveling. Land leveling is an easy way, and now there are laser land leveling, which would really reduce the amount of application water. And then we move into remote sensing, and they help remote sensing technologies on data and analysis. They measure evapotranspiration and they measure productivity. They also, satellite imagery can help in assessing groundwater and monitoring water use, and also climate change impacts and predictions of those impacts. This is my last slide. Sorry, I have taken too long, but I thought this is important to highlight. I'm not going to repeat. This is just concluding some of the things that I've mentioned. We really need to look at research. We need to highlight the importance of conducting updated studies, data collection, monitoring networks, etc. Rainfed farming requires much attention, much research, and much investment. With regard to technology, we really need to learn from traditional systems. And when we apply new technology, we really need to look at appropriate new technology. So finally, let me say that integrated vision and policies, political will, scientific research and innovation, higher institutional and human capacity, and adequate investments. These are all prerequisites for effective water governance in Yemen. Thank you very much, and sorry, Dr. Khaled, for taking maybe more time than allowed.
Shukran, Dr. Mohamed. Thank you for discussing the holistic approach to water management. Some of the key issues is rainwater harvesting. It needs to be scaled up and marketed very well. Land use regulation, we're really behind anywhere in this planet. We just continue to develop ongoing. Environmental impact is something that we, in America and specifically in New York City, environmental impact is one of the priority in any land development. Population growth is obviously something that we need to change in our culture. The next speaker is Dr. Fadhl Al-Nozaily. Will discuss the effective practice which led to resilience of water utilities during the war. Dr. Fadhl Al-Nozaily is a professor of water environmental in Sanaa universities. Dr. Al-Nozaily teaches undergrad and postgraduate subject. He published several books and articles in the field of water and environment. He served as a technical advisor for Sanaa Water and Sanitation local corporation during the period from 2002 to 2010. Dr. Al-Nozaily was also appointed as the Dean and Vice Dean of Faculty of Engineering. Dr. Fadhl Al-Nozaily, تفضل. دكتور فضل.
هاي دكتور خالد، يا مرحبا، اهلا وسهلا. انا الان بحاول ان انا ادخل عن طريق النت وافتح المحاضره عن طريق الكمبيوتر، بس في عندي مشكله الان، فمش عارف. انا حبدا اتكلم في التليفون يعني اتكلم في التليفون مباشره، ما فيش امكانيه ان انا اعمل عرض للمحاضره، مش عارف ليش.
Okay, أعتقد إنه at this point we do have no choice, so continue on the phone and your presentation by voice will be more than enough. تفضل.
Dr. Khaled, just if I can add, if you have the presentation of Dr. Fadhl, maybe you can open the presentation from your side.
No, I don't have the presentation, but he could actually talk about water on the phone, and I think that will be effective.
اوكي، ابدا اتكلم الان. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
تفضل.
اهلا وسهلا بكم. الموضوع اللي حتكلم فيه انا هو الممارسات المبتكره والفاعله في مؤسسات المياه لتعزيز خدمات المياه والصرف الصحي في حاله الطوارئ والازمات. هذا البرنامج او الموضوع هو حقيقه يتعلق بمسابقه الدكتور عبد الله بابقي الله رحمه الله عليه، واعلان المنافسه هذه كان موجه لمؤسسات المياه عن طريق مركز المياه والبيئة بتمويل هولندي، وهذه الجائزة تهدف إلى تسليط الضوء على الممارسات المبتكرة والفاعلة في تعزيز وتحسين خدمات المياه والصرف الصحي في اليمن أثناء الحرب والأزمات. الهدف منها هو الاستفادة أو إفادة المؤسسات الأخرى مما عملته يعني أو أبدعته أو عملت أو يعني من الممارسات اللي طبقتها أو الفاعلة أو المبتكرة اللي طبقتها بعض المؤسسات. طبعا تقدم للجائزة 15 فريق من 8 مؤسسات. المؤسسة صنعاء لوحدها 8 فرق تقدمت، منها أيضا المؤسسة العامة للمياه والصرف الصحي، المؤسسة المحلية للمياه والصرف الصحي في دمار، والمؤسسة المياه والصرف الصحي في إب وفي الحديدة وصعدة وحجة والبيضاء. من خلال تلخيص هذه الممارسات تم تصنيف الممارسات المبتكرة والفاعلة إلى ممارسات مالية وممارسات فنية وممارسات تتعلق بعلاقات المشتركين وممارسات الأداء العام. إذا فندنا الممارسات المالية هي عبارة عن تعزيز الفعالية في قراءة العدادات وتحصيل فواتير المياه، التوسع في فتح نقاط تحصيل إضافية. أنا أحاول أسرد أيضا المواضيع الآن واحدة وبعدين أرجع أفصل على يعني ممارسة. تدابير استرداد كلفة التشغيل والصيانة، الحصول على خدمة المياه بنظام الدفع المسبق، البحث عن الدعم. هذه هي بعبارة عن ممارسات سميناها ممارسات مالية لأنها تتعلق بالأمور المالية. تأتي بعدها الممارسات الفنية. الممارسات الفنية تتلخص في استخدام الطاقة الشمسية لإنتاج المياه من آبار المؤسسات، إدارة تقليل الفاقد في شبكات المياه، تعزيز الموارد المالية أو المائية بالتغذية الاصطناعية للمياه الجوفية، استخدام برنامج أوراكل لإنشاء قاعدة بيانات لآبار المؤسسة وتوثيق تشغيلها وصيانتها. نأتي إلى ثالثاً ممارسات علاقات المشتركين، وتتلخص في تنفيذ حملات توعية مجتمعية، استقبال وتوثيق شكاوى المستفيدين حول شبكات المياه والصرف الصحي. المجموعة الرابعة اللي سميناها ممارسات الأداء العام، اللي هي تتلخص في تحسين جودة المياه في بعض آبار المؤسسات، تعزيز الموارد المائية بتخصيص الحوض المائي لآبار المؤسسة حصرياً، التصنيع المحلي المبتكر، وتركيب شاشات عرض لمراقبة الأنشطة الرئيسية للمؤسسة، تخزين الوقود الاحتياطي، وتفعيل حوافز لفرغ تحصيل الفواتير. طبعاً أنا الآن حبدأ ممارسة يعني ألخص الممارسة. فالممارسة الذي سميناها تعزيز الفعالية في قراءة العدادات وتحصيل فواتير المياه، التي هي ترجمتها Enhancing Effectivity in Meter Reading and Collection of Water Bills. تم تطبيق هذه الممارسة باستخدام أجهزة فوترة متنقلة تسمى Personal Digital Assistant PDA، وهذه الأجهزة مربوطة بالسيرفر الرئيسي، يتم عن طريقها التحصيل المباشر للفواتير من المستفيدين وإصدار فواتير فورية. الممارسة الثانية في المالية التوسع في فتح نقاط تحصيل إضافية، التي هي increasing and expansion of the collection points. التعاقد هنا مع جهات تحصيل في مواقع مختلفة داخل أمانة العاصمة لتسهيل تحصيل الفواتير بالقرب من المستفيدين عبر مكاتب البريد الكريمي والصرافة وسويد للصرافة والبنك اليمني للإنشاء والتعمير وبنك اليمن والكويت وفروعها، مع إرسال رسالة SMS على جوال المستفيد. الممارسة التي بعدها في المالية ما زلنا، اللي هي تدابير استرداد كلفة التشغيل والصيانة، الذي Cost Recovery Measures. تتضمن هذه الممارسة إعادة النظر في رفع تعرفة المياه على القطاع التجاري مع تحملهم اشتراك ثابت للصرف الصحي. الممارسة الأخرى للمالية اللي هي البحث عن الدعم، اللي فند هانتينج، وهي إعداد رسائل إلى الجهات الممولة، القيام بتغطية إعلامية، تنسيق زيارات لمسؤولية الدولة والمنظمات توزيع لتمويل مشاريع في المناطق المتضررة والأنشطة المتوقفة لتوفير وسائل تشغيل وأعمال الصيانة وتوفير قطع الغيار، وتنفيذ مشاريع الطاقة والشمسية وتوفير الديزل لتشغيل المولدات. هذه كلها استفدنا منها من الدعم الخارجي. الممارسة الأخرى الحصول على خدمة المياه بنظام الدفع المسبق، الذي هي Prepaid Water Service. هذه منطقة مكنة التي تتبع مؤسسة عامة للمياه والصرف الصحي. تم اعتماد التعرفة بنظام الشريحة الثابتة الموحدة والدفع المسبق بالتوصيل المباشر عبر المنهل أو العداد إلى الخزانات التابعة للمستهلكين بحسب الكمية المطلوبة والمبلغ المدفوع. في البيضاء أيضا نفذت هذه الممارسة مؤسسة البيضاء، حيث قامت المؤسسة بطلب سلفة من كبار المستهلكين لتغطية نفقات التشغيل والصيانة على ذمة الاستهلاك. الآن ننتقل إلى الممارسات الفنية، وأول ممارسة فنية هي استخدام الطاقة الشمسية لإنتاج المياه من آبار المؤسسات، الذي هي application of solar energy. تعزيز الإنتاجية المياه بتشغيل الآبار باستخدام الطاقة الشمسية ذات كلفة تشغيلية قليلة وصديقة للبيئة، مما ساعد المؤسسات المحلية على تقليل الكلفة والتغلب على غياب الطاقة الكهربائية والوقود اللي هو البترول أو الديزل. الممارسة التالية الفنية الذي هي إدارة تقليل الفاقد في شبكة المياه، واللي هي Managing the Non-Revenue Water. قامت المؤسسات بتقليل الفاقد عن طريق استبدال العدادات وصيانة الشبكة والتوصيلات المنزلية وإنشاء إدارة لتقليل الفاقد وضبط المخالفات ومتابعة التسربات في الشبكة عن طريق استخدام أجهزة الكشف عن الفاقد وتركيب صمامات تحكم بالضغط. طبعا هنا في صور كثيرة ولكن للأسف ما فيش برزنتيشن، فإن شاء الله نرجع أرسل لكم لاحقا البرزنتيشن. إنما معنا تعزيز مصادر الطاقة كممارسة فنية أخرى عن طريق التغذية الاصطناعية للمياه الجوفية الذي هي Ground Water Artificial Recharge. قامت المؤسسات بإنشاء البرك الاصطناعية لحصاد مياه الأمطار وتغذية المياه الجوفية لحقول آبار المياه. الممارسة الفنية التي تليها هي استخدام برنامج أوراكل لإنشاء قاعدة بيانات لآبار المؤسسة وتوثيق تشغيلها وصيانتها، الذي using Oracle computer program to create database for the local corporations water wells and document its operation and maintenance. تعتبر آبار المؤسسة محور عمل المؤسسة لإمداد المشتركين بالمياه، وركزت هذه المؤسسة إلى توثيقها عن طريق عمل نافذة لكل أصل من أصول المؤسسة تحتوي على كل التفاصيل المتعلقة بها أو به بالبئر يعني أو بالآبار، وحفظها في قاعدة بيانات أوراكل كونها ذات سعة تخزينية كبيرة وأمان عالي، تسهيل استرداد كافة المعلومات في أي وقت وإصدار التقارير اللازمة. نأتي إلى الممارسات التي تتعلق بالعلاقات العامة، اللي منها تنفيذ حملات توعية مجتمعية لأويرنس كامبين. تم تنفيذ هذه الممارسة باستخدام وسائل توعوية مختلفة مرئية ومسموعة ومقروءة، واستخدام ميكروفونات على السيارات المتحركة، وعمل بوسترات وإصدار بروشورات وفلاشات عبر التلفزيون والإذاعة والمساجد والمدارس وعقد لقاءات توعوية المجتمع. الممارسة التي تليها هي استقبال وتوثيق شكاوى المستفيدين حول شبكات المياه والصرف الصحي، اللي هي registration, scheduling and documentation أو documenting the beneficiaries complaints. تم إنشاء غرفة عملية تعمل على مدار الساعة لاستقبال وتوثيق الشكاوى المتعلقة بالمياه والصرف الصحي والاستجابة لها بما يخدم الصيانة والتدخلات المستقبلية، وذلك بنظام GIS، والذي يمكن من القدرة على استخراج الخرائط والتقارير التحليلية. تأتي بعدها تحسين جودة المياه كممارسة في الأداء العام أو تحسين الأداء العام للمؤسسات، وهذه اللي هي عبارة عن water quality improvement at some wells. قامت المؤسسة بإنشاء وحدات معالجة لتقليل تركيز عنصر الحديد وبالذات في صنعاء في مياه آبار صنعاء، وكذا إضافة وحدات حقن كلور على الخط الواصل من الإدارة إلى الشبكات وخزانة التوزيع بالنسبة للمؤسسة العامة، أيضا عن طريق تخفيف الملوحة بخلط المياه من آبار مجاورة بالنسبة للحديدة، وتوفير مختبرات تحليل ومراقبة جودة المياه باستخدام أجهزة ثابتة متنقلة ميدانيا لقياس التلوث والكلور المتبقي. تأتي ممارسة الأداء العام أيضا تركيب شاشة عرض لمراقبة الأنشطة الرئيسية للمؤسسة، الذي هي Near Real Time Dashboard، يعني Installation of Dashboard. عرض النشاطات المنفذة بواسطة المؤسسة وفروعها بشكل مباشر، وذلك أمام المدراء الرئيسيين باستخدام خرائط معلومات جغرافية واستعراض المؤشرات والرسومات البيانية بصورة مباشرة، والتي تمكنهم من عملية المتابعة واتخاذ القرار. الممارسة الأداء العام التي تليها هي تخزين الوقود الاحتياطي fuel storage. وهذه تم فيها توفير مساحات كافيه لانشاء خزانات وقود لتغطيه احتياج الديزل لفتره من شهر الى او من شهرين الى 3 أشهر. الممارسه التاليه دفع حوافز لفرق تحصيل الفواتير الذي هي paying incentives to field employees and collectors، وهذا تم اعتماد حافز مادي كنسبه من التحصيل، وذلك لتحفيز اداء العاملين في قطاع التحصيل ميدانيا او مكتبيا لرفع كفاءه التحصيل ومنع التلاعب والحفاظ على العاملين من التسرب. تأتي الممارسة الأداء العام التي تليها اللي هي تعزيز مصادر المياه فيما يخص تخصيص الحوض المائي لآبار مخصصة حصريا الذي هو allocation of groundwater basin for exclusive utility abstraction، وهذا تم باستصدار قرار من السلطات ذات العلاقة وعمل حظر على عدم الحفر من قبل أي جهة وجعل ذلك للمؤسسة حصريا لتوفير مياه الشرب. الممارسة التي تليها في الأداء العام أيضا التصنيع المحلي المبتكر الذي هي Innovation Local Manufacturing، والذي قامت المؤسسة ممثلة بمحطة المعالجة بصنعاء بتصنيع موقعي لمراوح التهوية في أحواض التهوية بمحطة المعالجة بصنعاء، وذلك باستخدام الكادر المحلي لعدم توفر قطع غير محلي وعدم إمكانية الاستيراد من الخارج نظرا لتوقف تصنيعها في المصانع الأوروبية لقدم هذه التصنيعات. وبهذا نكون استكملنا جميع الممارسات في الأربع البنود المذكورة، وشكرا جزيلا لكم جميعا. وأعتذر أن أنا ما قدرت أوصل إلى يعني توضيح الموضوع هذا بالصور وإشباعه وتغذيته بالمعلومات الكافية. شكرا جزيلا. تفضلوا.
شكرا دكتور فضل. Apparently Dr. Fadhl is connecting from Sanaa, and we all know how tough it is to connect with the internet. Very, very, very slow. Dr. Fadhl apparently talked about monetizing water, and this should be a question should be addressed, or maybe a research. How can we monetize water in a country where more than 85% of the people live below the poverty line, and the rest are near that line? Data management is a big issue, and any researchers looking to get information on water resources in Yemen, both directly and indirectly, is a big problem, especially for NGOs that operate in the West. Public campaign should be ongoing continuously and anywhere in the world. In New York City, we get more than 60 inches of rain, but public campaign is a big portion of what we do to manage water resources. Coincidentally, since last year, COVID-19, we're doing a lot of studies. One of the studies is we're doing it on our wastewater treatment system. We look at COVID-19 and look and compare it with the population, because a lot of people don't report they have COVID-19. But also air quality is a big factor. We've seen dramatic improvement in air quality. Al-Akh Mohamed Aglan did research on water impact during the war in Yemen, and will give us a brief discussion of his research. His paper was recently been published. He's almost finishing PhD student in Holland. Please begin your presentation, Al-Akh Mohamed Aglan. تفضل.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور خالد. وأنا سعيد جدا اليوم أنه أستمع إلى دكاترتي الأعزاء دكتور محمد الحمدي ودكتور فضل النزيلي الذي تعلمنا على يديهم وأنتجنا ودخلنا في المياه. أنا موضوعي في الأساس الدكتوراه هو كان maybe I will keep it in English, right? It's better. My subject was about indigenous or traditional water harvesting systems in Yemen, and as Dr. Mohamed mentioned before, it was widely practiced in Yemen, which is not the case today, and for so many reasons. But while I'm doing my research in Sanaa Basin, which is my case study, and during the war, we noticed some people start to use these systems. And we decided why not to investigate why the people came back to use the systems and how they are happy with the systems and to what extent they are using them right now. And And before I start some of my results, I would like to mention that water sector, it is, if not the best, one of the very few sectors which keep working in time of war, but due to the other impacts of financial and diesel impact, I mean, the war has huge impact on the water services, and that's why the people start to look for other options and to adapt themselves in such critical time. And during the research, we noticed that the water productions today is less than before the war, and it is impacted by more around 60%. But in the other side, the other water sources like water tankers and springs, water harvesting systems, they start to work more than before. But it does not mean they cover all needs the people need. The overall figure, the people today as suffering to get their water source, but they are being more and using less. So it does not mean the other water sources cover all the water needs people need. So in figures, before the conflicts, the public systems cover more than 50% of the as a primary sources, not as a secondary sources. Of course, many people are using 2 or 3 sources at the same time, but as the primary sources before the conflicts in Sanaa, the public systems cover more than 50%. But during the current war, it is less than 15%, while the other sources, including water tankers and bottled water, they increased from around 40% to more than 85% during the war. The water prices, particularly in the other water sources rather than public systems, they increased more than before, but it does not mean that it is now profitable for the owners of the water tankers. But the point, it is still it is the option the people can find as it is more available and accessible, and more water tankers start to take this business. And one important point, we noticed that in urban areas, the people who were practicing the water harvesting systems were less than 6%, but today they increased to around 24%. And when we ask about the reasons why they start to use water harvesting systems, the main reason, as we all know, it is the lack of water in the public networks, and followed by the rising of oil prices. So this is one of the main reasons. Force the people to start water harvesting using these systems. More than 70% are happy to keep using them, even after the current war. So this is very quick figures, and to summarize, all water and sanitations have been badly affected, and the people are forced to look for other options. And if I add only one more point regarding solar pumps, as Dr. Mohamed mentioned, it is now very critical issue, and this is one of the points I would like also to get some of Dr. Mohamed and Dr. Fadhl feedback, and also our experts who are participating this seminar. I remember last one, it was about solar energy, and when we opened this point discussion about solar pumps, it was claimed that it might has less impact than diesel pumps. And the main the justification is that it will be used only during daytime, which is around 8 hours, while diesel pumps are using during the 24 hours. So I'd like, and what I noticed last meeting, that I know in water sector we don't have policies to regulate such technologies. But what I realized also, if in the Ministry of Electricity they don't have such regulations or water or policies. So what I would like so I'd like to finish my talk to ask our experts what they could recommend and what they think about solar pumps, and what they could recommend for decision makers in this regard. Thank you so much for listening to this quick figures about my research.
Thank you, Brother Mosaad. I appreciate this quick and highlighted presentation on your paper. Working for 20 plus years in New York City, obviously we're rich in water resources, but we still have budget problem. We never have enough money to manage any program that we have to. So if there's if there's 3 takeaways that I will take from this event, it will be rainwater harvesting is something that we should take very seriously. Land use regulation, obviously Sanaa is continuously growing. You know, I remember that I also have expertise in soil science. Ertel and Beit Bos used to have a very beautiful soil that is also a recharge zone for water sectors. It was dramatically developed. Now, the question to ask, when is Sanaa going to have a border, the city of Sanaa? This is not happening, and this is a huge problem. In any project, from very small project to a big project in New York City, we do an environmental impact assessment. And this is huge because we involve not only water, but the holistic, whether it's transportation, whether it is infrastructure in general. And we need to look at these 3 very seriously in an arid, poor region of the world in water availability and also quality as a whole. Right now, we'll move into a Q&A. You know, feel free to ask a question to any of the presenters or add in any comment. We'll greatly appreciate it. So I'll hold the floor. One of the first question, I guess, they wanted to know where the money that comes out of NGOs, the World Bank, how is it used efficiently in Yemen? So please, you know, I'll ask, since Dr. Mohamed Al-Hamdi works in the international organization, do you have any means of tracking where the funds that goes from the World Bank or IMF or all these countries, is it effective? Is there a real impact in making a different, changing people's life in Yemen?
Shukran, Dr. Khaled. If I understood the question correctly, then the question is broader, not only during the war, but all the funds that have been spent in Yemen through the multi-international funding agencies. Has this really contributed to improvement in the water sector?
Correct.
Let me maybe respond to this from my earlier exposure to the water sector when I was working in the ministry, and also from what I see now from either ESCWA or FAO perspective. I think this modality of project implementation is probably not the right one for Yemen, or maybe not the right one for other regions as well, but particularly in Yemen, project concepts come with an idea, they implement this idea, and in many cases there is direct improvements. You can see the improvements. I'll give you an example. When I was in Yemen, I started my career as a project manager of a World Bank funded project on rural water supply and sanitation. And they introduced the participatory approach and the 5% contribution from the beneficiaries, etc., as if this is an invention. And forgetting that Yemen, well, traditionally, this cooperative process is embedded within society. So they come up with an idea, and of course it works, because then you tell people, if you pay 5% of the project cost, then we will implement this project. Forgetting that this actually harms, because then if the government and the World Bank comes and implements the project, the ownership of that project remains with the government and the World Bank. So it really never transfers into the community. So anything that is wrong and the maintenance needs, they wait until somebody comes to fix it. So usually these ideas, they come up with ideas sometimes from other regions, from Sub-Saharan Africa or from Asia, and they think they want to implement these ideas. Sometimes they look very nice on paper. And when they implement across the country, even in Yemen, different societies, different communities react differently to different technologies, to different approaches. And the way, what I'm trying to say is, trying to implement an approach that will succeed, that succeeded somewhere else, not necessarily is going to benefit that region. And in many cases in Yemen, we've been receiving, we've been at the receiving end, and we've not been objecting. So AFW selects a consultant on our behalf. They develop the project concept on our behalf. Everything comes ready for us to implement. And we don't have, in many times, a say in what we really need. And I think that that modality of development needs to change, because it has not really resulted in long-term sustainable benefits. A project ends, and then all the benefits that come with the project in a few years, it ends with it. So I really believe that we really need to be engaging with these multi-international organizations as Yemenis, because we know the circumstances, the local conditions. And let's start a dialogue, and let's define a modality that suits us for the future. So I can understand, no, in general, there has been improvements. I can see this, some of the improvements, but these improvements could have been much, much more if things were done differently. I hope I were able to respond to the question.
You're definitely answer the question, Dr. Mohamed, but this has actually opened the Pandora box to look into this in more detail and look at the project. How impactful are they? We could look at them in a yearly basis, every 5 years, every 10 years, and to see these projects and write a recommendation. And this is something that you should be considering with experts in this field. The next question will go to Kaled Alamarie. He's also an expert in water resources in Yemen and have worked with many of the presenters here. Fadhl, Dr. Ustad Kaled Alamarie.
Many thanks, Fadhl. Many thanks to Dr. Alhamdi, Dr. Fadhl, and Dr. Mohamed for the great presentations. Actually, I have a quick reflections and with the quick questions as well, especially regarding the first part that was given by Dr. Mohamed. The first one is regarding to the food security issue. You mentioned we are importing around 3,100,000,000 is produced locally, and if not mistaken, you think the solution is to continue to import the food, or let's say the weight from the outside of the country. I agree with you. This is impactful on the water resources, especially the groundwater, and I mean, it will be wise to continue the importation. However, importation also has a lot of economic impacts in the country. In my opinion, if we could look back in the past, how the Yemenis used to manage their food, let's say 50 years ago, and decades and centuries before, and we can quantify what was the secret behind the, let's say, self-sufficiency of food production. The intensive care of agriculture practices in villages. So farmers used to pay unintensive agriculture practices to utilize the rain-fed agriculture well and to produce all foods they need along the year. I still remember in villages, people, pay or people practice the different corns production 3 seasons or 4 seasons per year. Sham, Sha'ir, Ber. So the whole cycle of the year, they were producing food dependently on the rains. So I see maybe the solution that Yemen needs really a real policy and strategy that is really designed, locally mined. How can we really, let's say, revive such intensive care of agriculture practices? So this is the, and I want to hear from you your opinion around this. The second one, yeah.
Well, if you we only have limited time, so who do you refer the question to?
This was a reflection. The question is addressed also to Dr. Mohamed regarding the climate change impacts. I was part of the RECAR initiative in 2014, where this initiative was producing, let's say, a regional model, including Yemen. So quickly, the model was saying that in upcoming, let's say, 50 or 100 years, we will face more droughts and more water shortages. However,
we have in the near future, we have a presentation that specifically deal with climate change and its impact.
Yeah. Just a question regarding the rainfall. So what we witnessed maybe these few years, especially this year, I mean, the reality is totally different from the story of the RECAR initiative models. Maybe it is early to judge that, but I wanted to hear your opinion. I mean, this year we witnessed a lot of rains.
Shukran, Abdul Khalik. And I think let's continue with another question from, and I don't see first name or last name, but M. Bingober, I believe. Is that pronounced correctly?
الو السلام عليكم. ايوه محمد بن جاب، محمد جابر بن جاب.
محمد اهلا وسهلا.
طيب سؤالي هو الدكتور محمد الحمدي، بس قبل ما اعطي السؤال اعطي بس خلفيه. في 82 عندما كنت انزل رداع، كانت رداع الجو جميل، شجر السفرجل، الرمان، كان في قات العنب. في 2014 لما نزلت كلها قات وقراطيس القات وغبار، منظر سيء. في الثمانينات كانت الآبر على بعد 30 متر، في 2014 ينزلوا بالارتواز 800 متر. وعندما تكلمت ليش، زي ما قلت أنت في إحدى السلايد، العائد المادي من القات أفضل بكثير من العائد المادي من أي زراعة زي القمح، القضب، مع إنه في لما يزرعوا القضب كانت في الأغنام الأبقار، الآن ما عاد فيش، في سايد إفكت. سؤالي الآن، إذا المواطن ما فيش له عائد مادي من الزراعة، حيزرع إن شاء الله مخدرات يعني بعد 20-30 سنة إذا في له عائد أفضل من القات. إذن الدولة لازم تعمل، لأنه مجتمع اليمني أول شيء أن educated من الناحية الصناعية، مجتمع الرأس المال ما هو شيء distributed equally. هل ممكن وزارة المياه ووزارة الصناعة تعمل مشاريع المواطن will find incentive؟ أنا كنت فكرت في فكرة إنه أعمل عندنا في ردع عندنا أموال كثيرة كلها للأسف الشديد قات، مع أني عمري ما خزنت قات وما قدرت أقنعهم بزراعات أخرى، إنه نعمل سيريال، يعني مصانع اللي هو تعمل زي الكرومفلكس والأشياء كذا، نزرع الأراضي كلها يعني ويت، وبعدين نصنعها صناعات تحويدية، طماط، صلصة، أشياء كذا، بحيث تشجع المواطن إنه يحول أراضيه وكذا. لكن هذه مشاريع ما ممكن اندفيديوال يعملها، ما عندي أراضي، ما عندنا أراضي واسعة اللي تفيد المصانع. هل ممكن وزارة الصناعة مع وزارة المياه تجمع المواطنين، تعطي سم انسنتيف إذا زرعتها قمح وتبني مصنع أو شيء، بحيث هذه المصانع يكون زي الستاك هولدر owned by the people. الجفرمنت يمكن تملك 20%، بس عندما المواطنين أصحاب الأراضي عندهم ستاك، الانسنتيف العائد حيكون أفضل بكثير وحيقتنعوا عندها إنهم يزرعوا قمح. هل ممكن نعمل هذا؟ عندك يعني الصين ما حصلت لها النهضة إلا الحزب الاشتراكي بدأ. أمريكا والغرب قبل ما تبقى الديمقراطية والكابيتاليزيشن بدأت الدولة بهذه المصانع وسلولي ليكت تو المواطنين. هل ممكن في اليمن نعمل هذا الشيء؟
شكرا أخي محمد. One more question, and then you could answer all three questions because time is actually very limited. Any statistic or studies can predict the future of food in Yemen? Obviously, food security is a big issue. And COVID-19, post-COVID-19, food is predicted to be short throughout the world. Mohamed, you could answer all these questions before we end.
شكرا دكتور خالد. دعني في البداية أود أن أجاوب على السؤال المتعلق بالأخ جبر من خصوص القات والadded value. أولا أنا لا أريد أن يعني أبين بأني مع القات أو مع زراعة القات. أنا أولا لا أخزن القات، وأنا بالعكس ضد. أنا يعني من الناس الذي متخذين موقف من سواء استهلاك القات أو استخدام القات. لكن what I was trying to present was the water productivity from a water perspective. People have shifted because of that financial profits. And as long as GAT is legal, as long as people, it has is highly demanded, farmers will do that. I mean, that's the nature of humans, is to move into, whether it's good or bad or etc., as long as it provides income. And that's what I was trying to say. GAT does not contribute physically to food security. On the contrary, maybe if they had farmers cultivated wheat or cereals, they would physically provide available food. But it provides an economic access to food. Farmers in rural Yemen are able to buy food that is imported from outside. Now, how to deal with GAT and how to deal with adding value to the products through agricultural manufacturing, agricultural industries, food industries, etc. That increases the added value, the water productivity. If you produce wheat, it's different from packaging wheat, and etc. So you want to package it in an industrial form so that it adds value to that product and increase the water productivity. So the government, not the government, but the state, really, the state needs to define how it deals with GAT. And once we have clarity on what we want to do with GAT, then options will be available. I remember when we were at the ministry, there were ideas on let's ban the cultivation of GAT in Yemen, and let these farmers who grow GAT in Yemen invest in Ethiopia and then produce GAT in Ethiopia, bring it to Yemen. So they still are in business, and at the same time do not consume the water they use for GAT production, because it becomes cheaper for us water-wise. So that import of food, that brings me to the other question on importing food and food security. Food security in Yemen, even in the 60s, I showed the graph, even in the 60s, we were importing food. We were importing cereals. And this is not going to change. During the last 50 years, the international market, the global market, has been able to provide food to everyone. And I don't see that this is going to change in the future. So we really should not go with the frame of mind of let's have self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency means water that we do not have. We cannot produce everything that we eat simply because we don't have the water to grow that food. So import will remain part of our lives as part of the food security. And self-sufficiency, I don't think self-sufficiency should be a direction for Yemen. And rain-fed farming, Abdul Khalid, yes, you are right. You're absolutely right. We really need to look at rain-fed farming more seriously, see the research on how to enhance and increase the productivity in rain-fed farming. How do we manage and how do we support farmers in rain-fed farming? That is basically the silent question. Rain-fed farming or rain-fed agriculture is not really high in the agenda. We really need to put more emphasis on that. With regard to climate change, the issue of climate change, it's so early to see. I mean, these predictions are mid-century, which talks about 2050, and 8th century to 2100. So you really cannot predict or say the observations in the last 2 years have not been in line with the predictions. But what is for Yemen is that there will be more water, there will be more precipitation. That is slightly more. But how it will come in intense weather events, which means flooding, which means destruction. So it's not going to be in a beneficial manner. So we really need to prepare for a lot of those floods to come, and maybe more heat waves to come, which will also have a problem. So it's too early to judge, and also we really need to think of intensity and extreme weather events. I hope I was able to answer the questions effectively. Thank you.
Shukran, Dr. Mohamed. The last two questions, and then we'll end it, is to Sharaf Al-Kibsi.
Salam ya Khalid. Allow me to say something before
the
last two questions. I apologize. This is as if a point of order. كان في زميل عزيز وصديق الدكتور اسماعيل جند كان رفع يده electronically just after
he disappeared. I was going to give him an opportunity, but he was gone.
Yes, I just did call him. He actually, I thought he's mad or something. So I called him. He actually had to go somewhere. So, and because he's a very knowledgeable geologist, as we all know, he had something to say about the water issue. I just wanted to apologize to him, even if he's not here, because this is what happens in such an event. I mean, so many people on the screen, we miss this, we miss that, so that it happens. So I apologize. We apologize for that. That's it. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. I was looking for him, but he was already gone. So, you know, patience is virtue. Sharaf Al-Kibsi, and then finally, Samar Abdullah will ask a question, and then we'll wrap it up. Shukran.
Yes, thank you. I would like to just bring in 2 points from my observation. I'm working within the microfinance sector in Yemen, and I do a lot of financing for solar pumps. So I am a big advocate for solar pumps in Yemen. And there has always been these 2 arguments that I continue to hear from water experts. Number one, if you do water pumps, then you will take all the water and then we will run out of water and people will abuse the water usage. And I always compare it to diesel because people will pump water no matter what. It is just a matter of diesel or solar, and we're just replacing the diesel, which consumes a lot of Yemen hard currency, and we'll replace it with more sustainable source of power. And it's important to realize that water is important for hygiene. And if we don't pump water, people will have more diseases. And we should not really put comparison between solar pumps and diesel pumps. And we should actually encourage people to use solar pumps to pump water to have hygiene and prevent diseases. Point number 2, I always hear the argument that as if, you know, when water rains in Yemen, the whole water is saved somewhere and we have access to it. And if we continue to use it for gat or for any other vegetables, then it will be, you know, derived for some other alternatives. And there is an example that I always refer to, which is the case of bananas in Yemen. The Yemeni banana has proven before the war and after the war that it is the most resilient product in Yemen. From a price of 300 Yemeni rial, you can get, you know, 1 kilo of bananas. That's before the war, which is around, you know, $1 and you know, and a few cents. And now after the war, it has been the same price, around 350, and the maximum it has reached 400, which is in dollar terms have actually dropped to 80 cents. And bananas is considered one of these fruits that consume a lot of water compared with other fruits. But the bananas in Yemen, they actually give the potassium needed and the fruit vitamins needed for Yemeni kids. And if we start to look at water as a base for what we produce and what we don't produce and how we should, we're going to sacrifice a lot of economical wealth and a lot of health factors. Imagine if Yemeni people have to import gat from Ethiopia and they have to put in hard currency. We can't send Yemeni people to grow gat over there. But the point I'm trying to reach is food security. It is a top priority, and water should not be the main reason of how we decide on how food security.
In our future events, we do have on the program food security, and that will be included in later presentation by experts in the field. Shukran, Sharaf.
Thank you.
Samar, please ask your question.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for all of you for the informative presentations. عندي مداخلة بسيطة وسؤال بسيط للكل يعني. طبعا كما نعرف اليمن من بين الدول التي تعاني نقص المياه، ومع ذلك كان بالإمكان منذ زمن يعني تجاوز الكثير من العقبات، كمثال مثلا بناء السدود، استثمار مياه الأمطار، ترشيد استخدام المياه، جعل الآبار المحفورة تحت تصرف الدولة. طبعا هذا إذا كان عندنا دولة. سؤالي الآن، هل هناك دراسات حقيقية لحل أزمة المياه في اليمن في ظل هذه الحرب؟ أم كل ما يحدث هو يعني ندوات ومحاضرات افتراضية تنتهي مع انتهاء الندوة؟ هذا سؤالي وشكرا جزيلا مرة ثانية.
شكرا أخت Samar. Apparently, Dr. Fadhl have connection issues, so I'm gonna throw this question to Dr. Mohamed again, and I do apologize for kind of pushing this event and answering all the questions. تفضل Dr. Mohamed.
شكرا Dr. Khaled. Let me say that السؤال كان is there real studies to solve the water problem within the context of the war? Let me generalize the answer and say we have really not have real studies, except for very few, on solving the water problem throughout, before the war, during the war, etc. So I refer to a study that was done in the 80s. And that study has estimates that we still use until today. That study was done as part of a Dutch project at the Ministry of Oil at that time. And the numbers there is one report. We still repeat the same figures in that report. So real studies have not really been conducted. And that is why I tried to emphasize in the presentation that research, innovation, studies is really needed. And maybe for this forum where there is a lot of intellectuals, a lot of academia is present, to take this question forward and say, we really need to tackle this. It's not publishing a paper which has no meaningful outcome. We really need to answer the basic questions. How much water do we have? I mean, you see, I mentioned the rainfall, the figures on the rainfall, etc. We're not even clear on the basic questions. And I think we really need to have extensive research programs to answer the basic questions before we move on to develop plans and strategies, etc. That is on that. Well, with regard to what Sharaf has mentioned, it's nice to hear you, Sharaf, here virtually and see you virtually. But I really disagree with you. Water isn't a determinant factor on what we grow. It is a factor of what how we look at food security. We really cannot, for example, adopt a self-sufficiency simply for the fact that we don't have the water to be self-sufficient. And when I gave the example of, and that was a proposal that was discussed during the time when I was in the ministry together with Mohamed and others and other people as well. And that was just an idea. Let the investors, Yemeni investors, invest in Ethiopia to grow gas in Ethiopia. So the money is not hard currency, it's going to Yemeni investments in Ethiopia to grow gas. And where now Saudi Arabia is investing in wheat and cereals in other countries, offshore investments. Why don't we do this for gas? If gas is so valuable to Yemen and relieve the water, relieve the pressure on our water resources, which is very limited. So there are opportunities to look at that. I think water security and food security is two issues that we really need to connect more and not to disconnect. Water is an element that tells us what to grow, where to grow, and how to grow it. Thank you very much.
Shukran, Dr. Mohamed. This has been very insightful and productive event and presentation. And I do apologize for Dr. Fadhl for connection from Yemen. This officially ends our meeting, but before I end it, I want to let you know that on January 9th, 2021, the first event will be talked about the closing the digital gap in Yemen. Again, closing the digital gap in Yemen is scheduled for January the 9th, same time, 5 p.m. Sanaa time. And we will have many events along the way, including climate change and food security that are in the pipeline. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for being patient with us. And it's been a productive and a successful year for for our organization, despite all these issues that are, from COVID-19 to the war in Yemen, but we will get through it. We must see light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thanks, Khaled.